Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Cannabis Tech Talks. You're chopping it up with Chuck here, and we are very excited to be speaking with Roger Obando today. And we are going to talk about, we're going to talk about him. We're going to talk about his background. And most importantly, we're going to talk about his new book, The Highest Common Denominator. How you doing, Roger?
Great, Chuck. So excited to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much. We were really jazzed to be able to talk to you because you have such a you've got a heck of a background, in the industry and kind of a tech related background. And us being, cannabis and tech today, we were really excited to get to talk to you. Can you tell the audience a little bit about your background?
Of course. Actually, I was thinking about this before jumping on here with you. I think it's really appropriate that it is a cannabis and tech podcast because of my background. So I have a computer science degree, got that way back in 2000. So I'm a dinosaur compared to most of the guys doing tech these days. But I've been doing tech stuff ever since. I mean, I came up in the days of large consulting. I did a lot of that for many years, had my own consulting firm in New York and Los Angeles for many years. Worked with a lot of big name firms, everyone from JP Morgan and Deutsche Bank to most studios in Los Angeles and a bunch of automotive companies like Nissan and Honda. And then one day I just decided that services were the devil and I no longer wanted to be in the service industry. I think as a lot of technologists kind of come to realize as well. And I decided to jump into technology startups and actually owning a product. I had a couple of swings and misses before I finally found Baker, but in 2014, myself and my co-founders, Joel Milton and David Champion, saw an opportunity to create a company to address a specific issue in the industry. And, that issue, and I'm sure you guys remember this, back in 2014, I was on the East Coast and we were seeing all this media coverage about these huge lines of people waiting outside of dispensaries. And, we looked at that and then living in a city where we were so used to Grubhub, this is before Postmates, but like Grubhub, things like that. We said, hey, we can solve that problem. What if we build an online reservation system for the cannabis industry and start selling this to dispensaries? Fast forward 4 years later, we had grown Baker into one of the largest CRMs in cannabis, actually the largest CRM in cannabis. We had acquired approximately 35% of the legal market share. So 1 out of 3 legal cannabis stores was using our systems. And at the end of 2018, we entered into a 4-way merger deal that valued our company at over $100 million, went public and I exited. So, that's the long and short of it for my 20-year career.
Just like you drew it up, right?
Yeah, right. Exactly. Just like I planned.
It's crazy. The world of, entrepreneurship, it's painted as so, this is the Instagram days and it's painted as so glorious and, everything like that. But you mentioned, some swing and some misses and stuff like that. That really is the entrepreneur's domain, if you will, being able to adjust and be resilient and, take a licking every once in a while, but keep on moving. And that really shows a lot of resiliency to stick with it and have that successful exit.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I spend a lot of time talking to young entrepreneurs, and I think a lot of them have a misconception. To be fair, a lot of young entrepreneurs now have come up in the era of the Mark Zuckerbergs and the Evan Spiegels, and they've seen that these guys are doing the old drop out of college, knock it out of the park on the first try. But for every Zuckerberg, there's 1,000 guys who, swing and miss every time and never make it, right? And I think most entrepreneurs fall somewhere in between those two ends of the spectrum. And, honestly, I feel like having some failure in your background is really beneficial. I think you can't really appreciate success without failure. And you learn so much more from the failures than you ever do from success.
Yeah, that's what they say. You don't learn a whole lot when you're successful, but it's like in the book, The Talent Code, you almost have to fail in order to ever approach any kind of level of mastery. It's like impossible to do it without it unless you're, like an alien or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. And I feel like, and the media doesn't do us any favors, right? I understand I'm talking to a media outlet right now, but so much of the media just wants to cover, the home runs. They
Yeah.
don't really get into the past. I speak to a lot of groups nowadays, and they want to hear all about Baker. They don't want to hear about Camino. They don't want to hear about Hitch Radio. Those things that never really happened, right? Like no one really knows about them because they never took off. But a lot of the experience that I had with those companies is what contributed to the success of what Baker became.
So did you have an aha moment? Where you had the idea for this, the software, the CRM, to where people could, not have to wait in line. Can you remember when you had that moment where you were just like, I think we've got something here?
Yeah. There's actually probably two moments in particular that I think about as aha moments. And the first was, when we first decided to start the company. I'll recount that story real quick, just because I think it really shows how important serendipity is in the path to success. I was working out of a co-working space in New York City, and the space was called Fueled, and I had a desk next to it. We've all been to these spaces at this point. You have a bunch of people just kind of milling around, and I had a desk that I was only borrowing from a friend because I couldn't afford to have a real desk. I only had a community membership where I could sit at one of the big tables. But fortunately, a friend of mine lent me their desk. And while I was sitting at that desk, I overheard the conversation that my now co-founders were having over the divider between us. And they were talking about a cannabis event that was going to be happening the next day. I just so happened to have been researching that event the night before myself. And again, as a starving entrepreneur, I knew that tickets were $400, and I was trying to figure out a way to get in without having to fork over the $400. And so, without even thinking twice about it, I popped my head up over the divider and I said, "Aren't tickets at $400? And they looked at me like I had two heads. Like, why would this guy, sitting in the room next to us, or the little cube next to us, even know anything about this event? So, before long, we started talking about it. We found out that I was thinking about the industry. They were thinking about the industry. Both of our companies were kind of in zombie startup mode, where you got a little bit of traction, and you got some people who kind of want to give you money, but they want to see a little more traction. You still have a little money in the bank, but it's not enough to keep you going long term. And so we were kind of trying to figure out what the next step was. Just like that, we started the company the next day. We started working on this product. And so that was the first kind of like, oh my God, this works out so well, especially because of the composition of the team. I'm a technologist, right? So I've been doing tech for 20 years. David Champion, my co-founder, was a reformed architect. So he had a lot of UX and UI skills that he was putting to use and doing online experience work. And Joel Milton, who ended up being the CEO, he's straight up business guy. That's money, networking, access, all that sort of stuff. So between the three of us, we didn't really need a whole lot more to get the thing going off the ground. We started going. So that was the first moment where it was like, that was way too easy, right? From one day to the next, we just got this thing going. And then the second moment kind of came when down the line, we had built our online reservation system. That was working well. We parlayed that into a digital loyalty system when we came to realize that customer retention was going to be much more important than customer acquisition in this space. But the last thing that we realized was that we had been gathering all this information about consumers. We have been gathering information about their purchase habits, their product preferences, their average spend, their average visit frequency, all this sort of stuff. And kind of the light bulb went off and said, wow, without even realizing it, we built a CRM for our customers. And we feverishly set off to build a targeted marketing platform leveraging SMS. Because as a lot of people know in this space, there's very limited avenues for people to use for advertising and publicity. You can't use Google, you can't use Facebook, you can't use Instagram. And so we've built a direct marketing tool set that allowed them to text their consumers with texts that were based on their data, so that they would have very high levels of engagement with the consumers. And that was kind of, for me, the big aha moment and what got us to that market share number.
Yeah, you checked all the boxes. You had a smart team. You're in the cannabis industry, so you're already kind of pointed in the right direction. You're focusing on data, and then marketing built in there. You pretty much you covered all the bases.
Yeah, and I think it's all due to really listening to the audience. I think so many founders fall in love with their ideas and think that what we want to do, like, no, they don't understand, right? Everyone always loves to quote Henry Ford and this quote about how if I would have given the people what they wanted, I would have built a faster horse. And I think there's something to be said about that for sure. But in an industry like this, where there's people who've been around the industry for far longer than we've even been alive, it made a lot of sense to listen to them and to say, hey, there's going to be pain points. And I know that this crowd is not terribly technical. Guess what? We are. Tell us what your problems are, and we'll start addressing those problems. And that's how we got to where we ended up.
So the and cannabis industry, were you cannabis consumer before? Were you someone that always had kind of an interest in the industry, or how did that kind of angle start?
Sure. I've been an advocate for cannabis legalization since I was about 18 years old. In my book, I recount the first experience of consuming, and I grew up in the Nancy Reagan Just Say No era. I had the DARE program in school. I'm the son of immigrants. So, it was even that much more pressure from them being like, don't mess up. You already have a target on your back. You better be the best kid in school, work as hard as you can. And I'll always thank them for instilling that work ethic in me. But, I was never one to be a strong risk taker. As far as experimenting with drugs and alcohol came. But when I was 18, I had a group of friends who finally convinced me to, take a couple of hits off a joint. And I'll never forget the feeling I had when I first smoked it, because it was so, it was so nothing compared to what I thought it would be. Right. And a lot of people think that when I say that, I'm going to talk about how I got high or whatever, but that's not the case. The thought I had immediately was, I've been lied to. Like, I've been lied to my entire life about how bad of a thing this is. And because of that, I immediately turned into an advocate for, I think for me, most importantly, truth.
Yeah.
But also, as a way of communicating that was for the legalization or decriminalization of cannabis, because at the end of the day, especially as I got older and I realized how damaging alcohol can be, at the end of the day, like, how is it that this is a Schedule I drug?
Yeah. Isn't it strange to think about how for so long this was, public enemy number one, and the disinformation that was out there and everything like that? It kind of turns out it was all BS.
Absolutely.
It was a made up thing. It was a nothing burger. It was like just a big nothing burger. A lot of people went to jail. A lot of, it cost people a lot of money and, things like that. And when, like you said, when you look at it now in retrospect, they could have been doing a lot of research. There could have been, just a lot. It was almost like the dark ages of cannabis,
Absolutely. And as a person of color, I'm of Costa Rican descent. Later on, when I really started to dig on the, there you go, Pura Vida, absolutely. When I really started to dig on the roots of why prohibition existed in the first place, and I came across folks like, Harry Anslinger and William Randolph Hearst and their role in really demonizing the plant, its xenophobic roots, and how it's been, wielded by everyone from Anslinger to Nixon to justify the incarceration of people of color. That just made me double down on my advocacy and hopefully the education of people. The minute you can tell people all day long that cannabis isn't that bad, it's not what you've been told, and they'll kind of, they'll nod their heads and agree with you. But the minute you educate them on the roots of prohibition, that's when they really start to listen. And, especially in this day and age with all, the topics of systemic racism that we're seeing in our communities, they'll really perk up and listen at that point. And, I'm really happy that we're at a point in our history where that is the case.
Yeah. Yeah. Even you think about it throughout history too, some people like, Nixon or whatever, maybe a little weed would have been good for him. Maybe if he would have smoked a J, he could have calmed down a little bit, and maybe history would have been different. Absolutely.
There's actually, I don't know if you've heard of this other podcast called Great Moments in Weed History. It's Abdullah Saeed. He's had a show on Vice. He was on Bong Appetit for a long time. And those guys, they talk about all these moments in history. And It's a really funny show. You should definitely check it out.
Dude, I love it already. Okay, listen, we're gonna take a quick break right now, and I'm really excited. When we come back, we are going to chat about the Highest Common Denominator, your book, and I'm excited to let the audience know a little bit more about that and dive into some more topics here with Roger Obando, and we will be right back. Okay, everybody, we're going to take a quick break here, but we just wanted to remind you that this episode of Cannabis and Tech Talks is brought to you by STM Canna, your source for some of the best tech in the cannabis industry, including the Rocket Box and the new grinder, the Revolution. All right, and we're back right now. You're chopping it up with Chuck here on Cannabis and Tech Talks, and we are with Roger Obando, and we are very excited to talk a little bit about your book. Can you tell us about what was the inspiration for it? Is it really all it's cracked up to be to write a book? And just give us a little bit of behind the scenes there.
Sure. Happy to do it. I'll answer is it all it's cracked up to be first. Writing a book, if you're not an author, is a daunting task. I'll do that. I am so used to this tech startup mentality of get something out there and iterate on it. And turns out you can't do that with the book. Turns out once you get a book out there, it's pretty much set in stone until you're ready to release a second version of it. So, working on something for over a year behind the scenes before I was able to release it was anxiety inducing, to say the least, but very happy I did it. The main driver for me to do the book was, I mentioned briefly earlier about building my company and going public and having an exit. I remember actually the moment when I decided to write the book. It was I was in Los Angeles. I was on stage at the Staples Center at the California Cannabis Awards, and I was receiving, along with my California market manager, a fellow by the name of Rico Tarver, I was receiving an award for Most Innovative Technology of the Year for Baker Technologies, which, in and of itself was a huge honor. And I was very thankful to be there. And I was really kind of, basking in the glow of the whole moment. But the minute I got off stage, there was a lot of congratulations coming our way. But what I didn't expect was that everyone kept harping on the same point. They said, it's so great to see a brown man and a black man receiving an award for technology in the cannabis space. And it was just kind of a common theme that kept coming up. And I kind of looked around and I did a quick inventory of my peers in the space, people who had come up along with me who had exits. And I didn't see any other brown and black men or women in the space. And it really made me understand how much need there was for diversity in this industry, especially in these early days. I think the message I've been telling people lately, especially young entrepreneurs, is that the time to get in, especially at the senior level of the cannabis industry, is now, because we're seeing so much conglomeration happen. And when the big dollars start coming in, you end up with kind of more traditional business people. And, for the most part, those traditional business people don't look like us. So now is the time to get in and really assert yourself and put yourself in a position where you can be in leadership, because diversity creates more diversity. So if we have diverse leadership, we're going to create a more diverse team. I was looking at that, and that was something that was very important to me, and by diversity, I don't just mean cultural diversity. I also mean gender diversity. Sure. I also mean LGBTQ communities. I mean, everything. I was always a big champion of diversity at Baker. And I think it's something that really needs to be spoken of. But also, with that same privilege of being in the position that I'm in, the platform that I've been granted for that, I also understand that there's a responsibility that I have to speak to my own community. And for me, that is a community of Latin Americans. I grew up in the East Coast amongst Puerto Ricans and Dominicans and Ecuadorians. And I know that while the message that most people end up hearing is that the man is trying to hold us down, I also, having come through it, understand that there's a lot of issues within our own communities that need to be addressed. Issues of nationalism, issues of tribalism, issues of not being able to stray too far from the company line as far as culture is concerned. And, I'm in a unique position as one of those people to speak very frankly to them and say, hey, there's opportunity to be had. Yes, there's systemic issues, but also let's talk about the things that are messed up within our own communities. And let's talk about what you have to do. And the book turned into me telling my story and mostly focusing on a lot of decisions that I think people within my own community probably wouldn't have made the same decisions. So walking through why I made those decisions, why I did the things I did in order to, kind of hold the book up as a mirror to people so they can look at their own decisions and say, well, what would I have done in that situation? And I hope that is going to create some inspiration, especially amongst young entrepreneurs, to come in and say, okay, here's my chance. Maybe I need to think about this a little differently and create some opportunity for myself.
So do you think that, the lack of, people of color in tech and in cannabis in particular, do you think that comes from access? Or do you think it's kind of a, like you were saying earlier, it's a little bit of this, it's a little bit of that, but it definitely is evident in the world of tech. And then that's just translated over into cannabis that, basically, hey, we need more diversity. Is it where do you think that stems from?
Actually, I think you hit it right on the head. The term access is something that I've been using quite a bit to describe the core of the problem. I get a lot of young people of color, young entrepreneurs, women who are very frustrated, and they come to me and they say, I've been going to venture capitalist firms, and at the end of the day, I just think they're racist. They don't want to invest in people of color. They don't think they want to invest in me. And at the end of the day, I will be the first one to say, I think you're wrong. I know a lot of VCs, and every VC I know sees only one color, and that color is green.
Yeah, I was just going to say that. Green, that's it.
Yep, that is it. As long as you come to them and they can see, like, you can show them how investing in you is going to make them money. They don't care if you're purple and you come from Venus. They really do not. I think the issue is an issue of access. Mm-hmm. While a lot of early stage startups, and I've gone through this several times, a lot of early stage startups, the first thing you do is, generally speaking, you raise a friends and family round, right? Which means you're reaching out to your network of family members, of their friends who saw you grow up. And, these are people who potentially, and I've been through this several times, including with Baker, friends of family who can write $50,000 and $100,000 checks.
Yeah.
Right. And then you end up with a little bit of a nest egg there that you leverage to get through the first 12 to 18 months, to build a prototype, to show some traction, right? And then you take that traction to the venture community or to the investor community at large, and they have something to base their decision off of, right? I think a lot of people in underprivileged communities don't have access to that network. They also don't have access to the knowledge that that's what it takes to get investment. I think they hear, again, the media covering from a very high level, this new company got funding, blah, blah, blah. And they're not privy to the fact that they've been around for 18, 24 months already, most likely. And they've been building stuff and they've been showing traction. So, I think it's a lack of access to this information. It's a lack of access to the resources. And it's a lack of access to the network, honestly, that, you end up having once you get over that hump. And that's something that I try to really tell people, and especially in these underprivileged communities, to say, you really need to go outside of your own community and you need to build the biggest and most diverse network you can, because that is only going to serve you in the future. You're going to be able to weaponize that network and leverage everyone within that network to make this happen. Because if you only depend on people within your own community, you're really, you're setting yourself up at a disadvantage.
Yeah. And I also believe that I think all of that makes so much sense, from a logistical standpoint and a practical standpoint and an access, area. But I think the other thing too is that we as a culture, you get what you celebrate. So, we've got several tech magazines that we do over here. Our background is in a publication called Innovation in Tech Today, and we really focus on STEM and, getting kids excited about STEM and STEM jobs, because we think that, if they're inspired to do stuff in STEM and it's cool and it's something that they see as a viable path, we'll have a lot more people of color and, women in the tech space. And so I think it's important that the media celebrates STEM, and that it's okay to to be an engineer or to invent something or to solve a problem. And I think that there's an important role that the media has to play too, in order to make it so that this is something that kids are saying, yeah, this is what I want to do. Young adults are saying, hey, I can do this. I can go into that. And so I think it's important also that that we're celebrating these entrepreneurs, and we're celebrating people that are solving problems, because I think then that manifests itself further, and we're going to get more people jumping in, and that's what we need.
I completely agree. And if I compare my graduating class at Duke in 2000, the computer science class at that point, I think my major was 30 people. I went back to speak with the head of the department last year while I was writing this book. And he said that, the class this year is going to be about 380 people graduating, and that it's almost a 50-50 split, male, female. So, that makes me really happy to see that all the work that you guys in media have been doing is working. People understand that there's so much opportunity here, and they're getting their education, and they're ready to hit the workforce. So I'm really excited about what the next few years hold for us in the industry, and the cannabis industry in particular, because, very smart people who up until now haven't been willing to join the industry because, the risk profile was a little higher than they would like. I think they finally realized the sky's not falling on us. And there's still opportunity here, and they're going to start jumping in with both feet.
And just out of curiosity, your book is how long is your book?
I believe it's about 290 pages long.
So people are going to get their money's worth. There's a lot of stuff here, 290 plus pages. Did you, I was just curious, did you type it all out, or do you when you get flowing, do you ever have you ever, done the speak to type, or did you sit down and just kind of just hammer it all out typing?
Well, it was a lot of conversations that were recorded, and then coming back in little drips and drabs and incorporating that sort of stuff. So it wasn't just one long hammering it out sort of session, even though at this point, after 20 years in tech, I type way faster than I speak. So that probably would have been a better way to go about it. But, over the course of a year, you're doing chapters at a time. And I'd be lying if I said I did this by myself. I have a creative partner who helped me on it. And, she's done books in the past. So she was able to say, okay, well, let's take this part of your story and let's see where it slots in. Is this a chapter 3 thing? Is this a chapter 5 thing? And you end up jumping around quite a bit, and it becomes basically a jigsaw puzzle that you piece back together into the best possible narrative. As I said earlier, doing the book is a monumental task. And if I had tried to do it on my own, I think it would have probably taken me 10 years.
Yeah, it just seems like a lot of work, and you were still working while you were doing it, right? I mean, you didn't just like a professional writer, hey, don't bug me for the next year, I'm going to be up here typing on my typewriter. You were still doing stuff, right?
No, absolutely. I mean, I was at Baker until the end of January of last year. I was already well into the book project. I currently advise 4 different companies, and I consult with 2 others.
Yeah.
So I've got a lot of stuff on my plate right now, and it was a matter of, fitting it in where you can. But I guess, being an entrepreneur, that is good training for that, because I think most of your life really is fitting things in wherever you can.
Absolutely. Yeah. 100%. So what are you excited about now? In the cannabis industry right now, anything that you're really kind of excited related to tech or innovations or anything?
Well, I think I touched on something a second ago that's got me pretty excited. And that is, for those of us who have been around tech for so long, you end up with this network of really talented individuals that you started, on the ground with. And you see them going through the different levels and layers of the industry, going from a dev to a senior dev to maybe architect or DBA, or some go the management route. And a lot of them end up at either chief product or chief technology officer. And, my network of people is chock full of those individuals. And as I mentioned earlier, they've been kind of hesitant to enter the space right now. Most of them, can't blame them. They're making good money at big companies. And, there was no need for them to take the big risk. And also, I've just always been one of those people who, the way I explain it to a good buddy of mine who works for Amazon, is that he's been hitting singles and doubles his whole career. I've been swinging for the fences the entire time. And we are, comparably successful, depending on who you're talking to. We just did it in very different ways. And so what I'm seeing is a lot of those guys who've been hitting singles and doubles are looking at this industry and finally realizing, hey, there's still a lot of opportunity in this space. that coupled with the fact that we're going through this big shakeout right now, where a lot of companies are downsizing, a lot of companies are falling apart. I saw this happen during the dot-com bubble in 2000, where those people who never really should have been in the industry in the first place, the ones who really aren't advocates and were just in it to make a buck, they go off and do whatever they should have done in the first place, real estate or whatever. And those of us who are still, really strong advocates for this industry, we're not going anywhere. We're staying in the space. So you end up with this realignment of good talent and this introduction and injection of fresh talent. So what I think is going to happen is a long-awaited explosion of innovation in the tech side of the industry. I think we're going to start seeing exponential growth in the industry. We're going to start seeing really innovative new products come out. There's a strong need for so many things in this industry. Someone has yet to come out with a fantastic ERP that is focused on the cannabis industry. And it's understandable why. I mean, that's a big task. That is a monumental task to come up with an ERP system. Yeah. Absolutely. There's going to be a consolidation of point of sales. There's far too many of them out there now, and we're trying to identify who the winners are going to be. I think there's a ton of opportunity for government regulation systems. I think the ones that are out there are, they're doing okay. They're filling a niche that needs to be done, but speak to any technologist, and I think most of us would say that most of that tech is pretty old and needs a refresh. So I'm excited to see what comes out of this industry, specifically in technology, in the next 18 to 24 months.
Yeah, tech is just, it's zooming along so fast, and everything that we've got from AI to, IoT to, just everything that's happening. It's all happening in the cannabis industry too, which is moving, super fast by itself as well. So it really is an exciting time. And we're probably going to see a lot of really cool stuff in the near future, helping the industry forward and helping the businesses in there. And I think it's pretty safe to say tech's going to play a big part of that.
Absolutely. And, so many companies are out there in stealth that a lot of people don't know about, that are taking advantage of, IoT and machine learning and AI to, reinvent this industry. Because, one of the things that I like to talk to people about is this opportunity for technology leapfrogging, right? A perfect example of this is Africa, right? Africa never really got a well-established landline system for phones in place. So when the cell phone was introduced, all of a sudden it exploded. Everyone had a cell phone. Yeah. And there's no legacy systems that you have to displace in order to get that market share. So I think that's a really good, metaphor for what's happening now in the cannabis industry. There's no traditional cannabis tech. So it's all blank slate. And that for me is incredibly exciting.
Yeah, I think I've heard that more people on Earth have smartphones than have access to clean water.
Yeah, I wouldn't doubt that.
Yeah, it's so necessary, as a part of life, and it's happened so quickly there. So listen, where can people get a copy of The Highest Common Denominator? Where can people get a copy of the book, or where can they find you?
Absolutely. So the book just came out last week. I'm really excited. It's interesting. Again, now I've moved on from author to self-promoter.
Yeah, you got some good ratings on Amazon too.
Yeah, I'm looking to get more of those. So you can find the book on Amazon.com. There's a Kindle version and a paperback version. Will soon be available on Barnes & Noble. But as of right now, I'm driving everyone to Amazon and begging and pleading people to leave me reviews. I really want to hear what the community has to say about the book.
Well, I tell you what, Roger, here's what we'll do. We will give away a copy of your book, and I bet we could probably get it signed by you. And we will give away a copy of your book to one of our listeners who share the podcast out or subscribe. So we'll keep track of that. And if you enjoyed this conversation, make sure you hit the like and subscribe. And we will give away a copy of this. I can't wait to read it myself. The Highest Common Denominator, Elevating Your Base Self by Roger Obando.
Oh, that's a great idea. Thanks so much, Chuck. I really appreciate it.
Hey, it's a pleasure. Look forward to catching up with you probably at one of these events or something like that. And again, thanks for everything that you've done. We really appreciate your time, and can't wait to read the book.
Thank you so much. It's been my pleasure.
Hey, everybody, thanks for listening to Cannabis and Tech Talks. If you like this podcast, make sure that you subscribe and share with your friends. And don't forget to check us out on iTunes, iHeartRadio, iPhones, anything with an I, you can find us there as Cannabis and Tech Talks. And don't forget to follow us on social media so you can stay in the conversation, and visit our website, cannatechtoday.com.